Bruno Le Maire, thanks for speaking with us here at the G20.
Thank you, and thank you for the invitation.
When the UN Secretary General at the outset of a summit like this one compares the world's global powers to a dysfunctional family, the expectations can be low. In the end, how did it go?
I would not use the same words. I would say that we are still a family. We are all around the table, and this is a very important point, and I think a great success for Prime Minister Modi. And at the end, we finally got a consensus and a compromise on the key points for the international community. I'm thinking, of course, of the question of war in Ukraine, the question of climate change, and the question of funding for the less developed countries of the world. So I would not say that everything is perfect, but I would say that we are going on the right direction. And since we are going on the right direction, this is a success for India and for the G20 presidency.
India, which champions itself as the heralding the causes of what it calls the global South. The family's just gotten bigger with the African Union joining. That's important because you have pressed on this pledge to favor, at the same time, growth and the reduction of carbon emissions.
This is a key point, because you cannot talk about the difficulties of African countries without having the representation of all African countries around the table. So we have been really pushing very hard with President Macron to have Africa around the table. This is done. I think that this is a major achievement for the G20, and it will help the G20 to take the right economic decisions to support African countries. And never forget that the countries that have been the most hit by the COVID crisis and that are the most hit by the war in Ukraine and by the rise of inflation are the African countries.
For the first time in a G20 communique, they're talking about a firm commitment when it comes to coal. It's not a phase out, though. It's just a phase down.
It's not a phase out because we don't have a very clear schedule, but clearly this is a good step in the right direction. We will get rid of coal. This is good news for all of us, because we are all aware that one of the key points as far as CO2 emissions are concerned is coal. And the second point, which is so important, including for G7 countries, is that it becomes more and more difficult to explain to your public opinion that you want to reduce the level of CO2 emissions, and this is very costly, while other big countries are still using coal. So the fact that all the G20 countries, the most powerful countries of the world, are having this goal to get rid of coal, this
Was
is
it
quite good
delicate
news.
speaking to your hosts on that regard? India, a big coal consumer.
We are all aware that many big countries are still thinking of opening new coal facilities for the sake of having more growth, more jobs, more prosperity. The fact that for the first time in the G20 communique, you have this idea of phasing down coal is the right step in the good direction, with the view of getting this final decision, getting out of the coal.
One European diplomat who was in the room said that the discussions were hindered by the US-China rivalry at this G20 summit. You're not just the Minister of Economy and Finance, you're also the Minister of Industrial Sovereignty. So what does the Minister of Industrial Sovereignty have to say about that?
I would not say that if anything is hindered by the rivalry between the US and China.
How did it manifest itself, that rivalry?
It manifests through decisions that have been taken both by China and the US. And the key point is not for European countries to look at what is currently done by China or by the US, but to draw the consequences of those decisions. We are all aware that there is not the right level playing field between Europe and China as far as trade is concerned. Let's draw all the consequences of this situation by taking the right industrial decisions. That's exactly what we are doing by providing state aid to the European industry. We are all aware that the Inflation Reduction Act, decided by President Biden, will have and already has a very significant impact on the level of industry everywhere in Europe. Let's take the right decisions, and the right decisions is not to try to oppose the Inflation Reduction Act, but to do exactly the same in Europe, to provide subsidies and financial support to our industry so that we could have one of the best industries in the world for the 21st century.
So this subsidy race, will that make the next G20 more fractious?
No, because at the end, there is room for everybody. You know, the lack of facilities to provide green hydrogen, solar panels, or other devices that are necessary to be successful in the fight against climate change means that every great power, every great continent, either China or the US or Europe, has to invest in the green transition. There is place and room for everybody.
Bruno Le Maire, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much.